Hello everyone, my name is Kerry Ramirez from Studymove, and in this weekly chart we are sharing the 2025 indicative limits in the number of international students for publicly funded universities in Australia. This information was shared by the Department of Education during the latest public hearing at the Committee of Education and Employment of the Australian Senate. And it sets limits in the number of new overseas student commencements in 2025 for each university. As you can see in the chart, the figures go from 700 all the way to 12,000, nearly 12,000 per university. This is an ongoing conversation and still requires legislative approval, but if this policy is set in place, this will be one of the most significant changes experienced by the international education sector in decades. And for that reason, we thought it would be important just to have a closer look at the methodology that it was used to establish these indicative limits. We understand that the Department of Education considered three main factors for this methodology. The first one is called international concentration and is based on analyzing for each university the number of 2023 international student enrollments divided by the total student cohort for each university. The department also considered the growth from 2019 to 2023 on the number of new overseas student commencements. And to complement the analysis, the department, we understand, made a few exemptions based on specific criteria that apply to certain universities. Now, if we look one by one, the first one, that is international concentration, and based on the figures that they were shared by the Department of Education, it's interesting to see that in 2023, once again, because we have seen this historically, there has been a big variation on the actual concentration across the university sector. Some universities have a very high concentration and some others have a very low concentration of international student onshore enrollments. Just as a reference, on average across the universities, the figure was 26% of international onshore enrollments. But as you can see, some universities have levels above 40% and some others above or below 15%. Now, we understand that the methodology considers four groups of universities based on international concentration, and each category will actually have certain levels allowed of growth on the number of new overseas student commencements. We have a first category that is for universities who have less than 15% of the international concentration, a second group of universities who have between 15 and 27%, then a third category which is for universities who have 27 and 37% of the international concentration, and finally a group of universities who have levels above 37%. For the first group, the one who has lower levels of international concentration, these universities, initially as part of the methodology because there are other exemptions, but in general, they will be able just to have the same level of new overseas student commencements reported in 2019 and all the growth that it was experienced between 2019 and 2023. For the second group, they will also be able to have the levels that they had in 2019 plus 90% of the growth that they experienced between 2019 and 2023. And the methodology keeps going until we have the universities with higher levels of international concentration that will be allowed to have the levels that they report of new overseas student commencements in 2019 plus 50% of the growth experienced between 2019 and 2023. Now, I think that something that it's important kind of to explain is how is this combination between the level that universities had in 2019 plus the growth that they experienced. So let me give you a good example. And I need to also say that before I give you the example, there are other exemptions that need to be considered, but just to have a general understanding of the methodology, this is going to be a good example for everyone. Let's say that, for example, we have a university that in 2019 reported 1,000 new overseas student commencements. And then in 2023, 1,100 new overseas student commencements. That means that the growth that it has been experienced for this university, it was of a plus 100 new overseas student commencements. And this is when the formula or the methodology comes all together. Because for this university, if that university has a level of concentration below 15%, it will be allowed to keep the 1,000 students reported in 2019, not students, new overseas international student commencements, plus the 100 growth that reported or experienced from 2019 to 2023. So in total, the limit, without the exemptions, that I will basically mention in a minute, but without the exemptions, the limit will be 1,100. For the universities who had between 15 and 27%, because they are only allowed to add the 90% growth and follow with this example, they will have the 1,000 that they had in 2019, plus only 90% of the growth. And then you have the 70% of the growth group, and then the 50% of a growth group, which will have 1,050 as the indicative caps in the new overseas student commencements. So that's in a general view how this methodology works. But I think it's also very important to underline that there are other considerations who have been made in this methodology. Our understanding is that the methodologies are based on what if a university didn't have any growth during 2019 and 2023. So there are special considerations for that group of universities. And also for universities who are smaller providers or smaller players in the international education market, there are also additional consideration to give them additional room to grow. So it's quite a comprehensive, and it takes time just to follow the methodology. And what we're trying to do today is just to provide an overview of what we understand is this methodology. But I want to highlight that this is what we understand based on the information that it was shared by the Department of Education. But obviously, is the Department of Education the right entity that you need to contact if you have any questions or you have anything related to this particular indicative student limits. I hope that this helps just to provide a better understanding, but once again, this is just what we understand that it is. So please just take your own considerations into that. And once again, I think that if you have any questions, please reach out at the Department of Education, because they are the ones who are implementing and establishing this very significant policy for the international education sector in Australia. I hope this helps. Thank you so much for your time, and please take care. See ya.